Another one is you can feel erased or invisible, and that could be either the way they're making you feel or however they react to you makes you feel like you need to hide or make yourself smaller or something like that. I'd say that those are indicators of toxic relationships, because positive relationships make you want to, you know, that you're completely safe to be there in your whole authentic being. And with a toxic relationship, it's not necessarily like that. You kind of feel like you want to shrink down so they don't talk mess or whatever. Like, if you're not feeling completely bolstered by the relationship and you're feeling like you need to make yourself smaller, or that they don't listen to you, those are some other telltale signs. I feel like you're feeling shunned or like an outsider or judged constantly. All those things are not part of a functional relationship. And anything that's encouraging you to abandon yourself, your truest authentic self, I feel like is a sign that that's not where you need to be spending your precious energies. And so with these self-abandonment or the feeling like you need to shrink yourself or feeling like they don't see you, all of that feels very lonely, right? So being in a toxic relationship manifests in a feeling of loneliness. These relationships create a great sense of loneliness because a true sense of intimacy is not there. And intimacy doesn't have to be just romantic intimacy, right? Like friendship, familial, whatever. It's not there. It's devoid of real personal connection and empathy. And I feel like that's huge if you feel like the person isn't really seeing you or isn't empathetic for your where you're at or your existence. It's not healthy. You're constantly sacrificing your own needs is a big one. And that's, again, circles right back to what Selma was saying about the balance of the relationship. If it's like more negative or positive, and the negatives outweigh the positives, toxic relationships can result in a lot of self-abandonment. And you feel like you have to forfeit your voice, your opinion, your wishes, your wants, your own needs. Like, don't be silenced, my darlings, ever. No one's worth it. There's that uneven give and take. Usually, toxic relationships involve an unequal amount of give and take, where one person must give a lot and receives very little in return. So, just make sure that you are in relationships that are balanced. Lack of respect. They don't put no respect on your name. That is a problem. Usually in toxic relationships, you're constantly undermining or causing harm to your partner, or in this case, the person is undermining you, causing harm to you. It can play out in a number of ways, but the general idea is that there isn't a sense of camaraderie, but rather disdain and resentment. And I felt like when I was reading that, it just reminded me of like two-sided friendships, where it's like you say you're homies, like, oh, what's up, play cousin? But then there's just always like what Jamie was talking about, those little negative comments. Somebody always got something to say, somebody putting you down, your people down, like just that lack of, concern and care. Feel like it may not be the person's fault. They may not know how to be loving to another person, but I don't think that it's your job to teach them those things either. And so, yeah, just knowing that I can say your worth is beyond measure, and I want you to go into the world knowing that. And now you're holding the reality of what your worth is, and don't let anybody disrespect that worth. Um, and then, to the super extreme of all of this in a toxic relationship is, so this is all the emotional abuse that can come, but then there's, physical abuse. that can happen in a toxic relationship. And obviously anybody putting their hands on you is full on toxic and should be left in the dust. And if you need any support in leaving a sucker, friend, or love or romantic person, whatever, we're here for you. Don't let nobody put their hands on you, because there's no amount of sorry or like apology after that really makes it okay. People need to have control over themselves, and it's not your job to teach them to love or whatever. If they don't have no control of themselves and they could get to that point where they're putting their hands on you, you have to get yourself out of there. And that's not a relationship for you. And there's no, it's a non-negotiable, right? Like if someone's putting their hands on you, it's a non-negotiable, even though it's hard, that has to be a no-go. It's without a doubt toxic before it even gets physical. But if something has gotten physical, it's crossed the line. It's the time to call it for sure. I feel like that's, the full on extreme, but obviously like you can hurt people well before hands are laid. So watch out for all the signs before that moment as well. You never get, right? So there's that one kind of relationship where the person never says sorry, no accountability whatsoever. But then it's trickier when you're dealing with someone who will say sorry to you, even though they've done something to you. Like they're good with the sorries. They'll give you as many sorries as you can handle, but they still keep repeating the same behavior over and over. That's when it's really tricky, because you're like, oh, they must care because they're willing to say sorry. But the proof is in the pudding if the person is still like constantly doing the same behavior. Yeah, so that's a really good example. And then gaslighting also is kind of this form of abuse. It's a psychological form of abuse where it's like the person denies the reality of another person, like manipulating the person into doubting the validity of their own emotions and their own needs, so it's kind of like you tell somebody how you feel about something, and then they kind of like switch it around and try to convince you how what you're feeling isn't valid, it isn't what reality is. So that's kind of a version of gaslighting. And that's, I feel like, a huge telltale sign of a toxic relationship too. And then I feel like that ties into lack of empathy, right? They can't hear where you're coming from or don't want to receive the truth of what you're saying, like your truth. And because that might mean that they're going to have some accountability for their actions. And so instead of being brave and being accountable for how they made you feel, they will try to convince you that how you feel isn't valid because X, Y, and Z have all kind of reasons why. And I feel like that's huge because your truth is so important. And if you are trusting someone enough to tell them how you feel, and if it's not received, they're telling you all you need to know, right? Like if you come at me and you're telling me how you feel and I'm not willing to listen, then I'm not worth your time or energy, because I'm probably a narcissist and all up in my own head and don't really care how you feel, right? So like, just know that you're deserving of people hearing you. You're deserving of feeling safe. You're deserving of reciprocal love from friends and romantic partners. And anyone who makes you feel like that's not the case, they got their own journey, and that's not your journey to help them through that. And your time is too precious to spend trying to convince them that it is, And Jamie's like gaslighting example, the person tries to blame you somehow, so never wanting to take responsibility and flipping it around. Like oftentimes I feel like it'll be trying to convince you that they're the victim of a drama that they created. But if you find yourself in some kind of toxic relationship on the spectrum from like just somebody talking a little mess sometimes and she's not really your friend that good to like full on emotional or physical abuse, you know, you're not in it alone. So toxic relationships, people in toxic relationships, we need help. We need help from our friends, our family, and professionals. And that helps us commit to change. And it's kind of that same accountability circle situation, right? Where like you have somebody that you kind of keep saying yes to, even though they don't deserve it. Perhaps having friends and family or someone else know the situation can help you stay on track for your goals of getting out of it. Kind of like checking in with you, or like straight up checking you if you're like, I'm about to call him, like, girl, don't call him. Like that, it's valuable to have somebody be like, girl, don't call him, or her, or whomever, them. So another one was express your feelings. So that's the living through your truth, right? The like in the way that you're making boundaries with yourself first, and then once you have checked in with yourself and you even know what you want and how you feel about it and what your gut is saying, then being definitive and verbally expressing it. And then there's like just making the decision. So after you've checked in with yourself and you kind of like got that gut check about like what is and is not right in that situation, then you have to make that decision for yourself. And that's, I feel like, what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the boundary with self first, because you can make boundaries with the outside world all day long, but if you still go on ahead and betraying your goal to get out of the situation, then it's never going to be concluded. Like, it's not going to work. So you have to make the decision, and then you surround yourself with positivity, girl project, and whomever else out there. People, the universe is conspiring for your good. There are loved ones out there. So surround yourself with positivity. It doesn't have to be people, like whatever brings positivity into your being, right? Like your art or your creativity, or you know, reading, or whatever your positivity is, whatever brings you joy. Dive into that, because that's another version of not abandoning yourself, because you're digging into the things that bolster you, be it people or activities or whatever. And then and it'll help you, you know, once you're bolstering positivity, then that negativity coming at you is it's not going to taste right. It's not going to feel right, because you know because you've surrounded yourself with light. You're going to know when some shady shadow shit's going on. And then after that, then you go back to your decision and you stick with your decision, because it's just like full circle. After you know it ain't right and you decide it's not right and you know you want to get out of it, and you've made a boundary with yourself, and you circle back each time to honoring that boundary. So those are some tools in the toolkit. Be definitive like Pei, be positive like Selma, and loving like JoJo. Get this done.